Hey Spilo, I'm trying to learn from my team, and for the most part, I feel confident. Brig from your team. My only issue is I'm wasting packs. Any advice how I can optimally use armor pack? So you want to armor pack squishies that are hard for your, it's hard for your BAP or Ana or whatever else to heal. I don't know what comp you're playing, but for like BAP Brig, you generally armor pack the squishies because it's really hard for BAP to heal Ashe from across the map, the Genji double jumping in the air, the Tracer moving around. That's really hard for your BAP to do. There's better things for him to be doing. And then also you want to be armor packing people that are under pressure. Sometimes you armor pack tanks even if they're under pressure. Generally avoid that, but you can even armor pack tanks. Like if your Genji's dueling, your Ashe is dueling, my BAP is being pressured, those are your armor packs. Armor pack is like a resource that you can use, but you always, when the mid fight breaks out, you want to have like 1 or 2 armor packs available because armor pack is what wins duels. Right? If your Genji is under pressure, if your Genji is going in hard, he wants the armor pack. If Tracer's going in hard, he wants armor pack. If your BAP is being dove, he wants armor pack. Even if your Sigma is doing another Sigma in an off angle, and they start to get really up close, the armor pack can be the difference between winning or losing that fight. So treat it as a resource that you can use every now and then. I'm going to give that. Okay, he needs healing, build up your ult charge. But when the fight actually breaks out, you want those 1 or 2 extra armor packs to help your team or an individual survive or win a fight. Yeah, it's like a temporary harmony orb. You harmony orb people who are doing stuff. The reason you don't armor pack tanks is because 150 HP to a tank isn't as valuable as 150 HP to a squishy, and you have a limited number of them. So you want to make sure that you invest it. Yeah, I'd say it's familiar. Okay. Number 1 tip to help improve positioning with Ana: keep your teammates in front of you. I talked about this like I don't know if you guys saw me with the Ana coaching with SVB, but your field of view is so important with Ana. You always want to be playing corners, obviously, everybody knows that. But you want to keep your teammates in front of you. I see a lot of Anas that end up right behind the Reinhardt shield, and then there's an Ashe being pressure from here, or the Sigma's dying over here. Like, you want to keep your team in front of you. The exception to this rule is generally sometimes if they're playing a Widowmaker, you have to be a little bit more careful about that. Should supports reposition to ensure the tanks are in the silence, or should tanks restrict their movement to ensure? Preferably both. Preferably both. This is why voice chat is sometimes useful, but I would generally say in ranked, support should reposition to ensure tanks are in sight lane because you want your tanks dictating how the fight goes. But then obviously if something's really bad for you, open your mouth, talk to your tanks. I don't get your explanation about the Brig concept where you whip shot first and stun second. No, I think what you mean is that I was saying don't stun, swing, and then whip shot. You want to stun, whip shot immediately because if you take the time to swing in between, they can break the stun and then avoid and negate some of the boop. Now this is the highest damage combo, but this is the hardest boop potential. So if you're looking for a raw boop, like booping somebody off the map, or you're trying to boop that monkey away from your backline, the 30 or 35 damage from the flail doesn't really matter. What does matter is making them go 2 or 3 meters further. And that's when you need to not swing. You go shield bash immediately into the whip shot so that they go further. Because when you're being booped, chat, remember you could counteract it with W key, but you can't counteract it if you're being stunned, which is why you go stun, whip shot immediately so that while they're being booped, they're still stunned. And so they can't counteract it. That was my stun face. Scrim environment, still priority on tanks, but supports should be way more vocal. Any tips for the upcoming coach working is booty off to get out of tier 2? Definitely reach out to as many possible teams as you can and get heavily involved in the Overwatch League analysis. Like study comps, learn how comps are played, what's meta, why it's meta, what is a big picture stuff. Not go into nitty-gritty detail, but like how do they position? How are the ultimates used? Fill in that information, study from the replays, which is a huge resource, and then contact and work with as many teams as you can. Very rarely have I ever worked with a team because they reach out to me. I always take the initiative myself. Don't wait for people to come to you. Reach out to every team that you possibly can, and then take your pick of the team that you want to work with. But definitely the Overwatch replays and take notes and stuff. Somebody asked a good question in the chat right before streaming that I want to ask. No, I've got tanks who don't push in ever, so I feel like I have to push to do something as DPS. I love playing them. What is the right thing to do in that scenario? So if you have really, really passive tanks, it's difficult, but focus on just doing your job. So like, think of it this way. Even a really, really bad bronze tank will eventually walk through a choke if the enemy team is like half dead. Or has the enemy team is backed up and run away, right? So what you could do is make sure that you're, if you're the tracer, that you're taking you're going to try and put pressure. Like when your enemy Orion walks to the choke and stands AFK, they're going to shoot his shield. there's your distraction as Tracer to start shooting the backline. Now, it's less ideal than a Rhino that's actually going in and swinging, but hey, it's something. You know, it's enough of a distraction for you to use. If you're a Junkrat, right, you'd like your Rhino to be able to close the distance so you could spam a little bit easier, but, you know, my Rhino shield, I can spam behind that for a brief window of time and just make that spam as accurate and as perfectly executed as possible, right? So if you have passive tanks, don't completely change up your playstyle. It's just important that you don't screw it up more than it is the other way around, right? It's extra crucial that you do it properly. But I wouldn't recommend. I mean, you can also just the voice. So like, hey, I'm gonna do this. Ryan, can you push up when I do this? If you use voice, that's always helpful too, especially if it's an ultimate. Remember catching one of your streams. Sorry guys, I gotta itch my back. Catching one of your streams and you went over point and map window. On every point in map, Widow was good and bad on. I agree with everything you said, but as a Diamond Widow, should I play her regardless of map just to learn her? And once I ring up myself, I can back. I should hit my house. Now, G-Man, I want to be pushed for Widow. Okay, so I think it's fine to stress test your limits. So I think playing Widow on a quote-unquote mediocre map is fine. Or even on a bad map is fine. The reason I don't always encourage to do it too much is because if you play Widow on a really bad map, and it feels really hard and it feels really bad, then you're stress testing yourself beyond your limits. So like people learn the most when they're challenged, right? But not when they're overwhelmed. So if you're playing Widow in an impossible environment to play Widow, it just feels like insanely hard. You're getting no value, you're getting dove, you have no sightlines, then don't play Widow. Play something else instead. Because at that point, all you're gonna do is you're gonna frustrate yourself, and you might even, worst case scenario, like think you're not wanna play Widow next time. So I encourage you to play Widow on maps where it's gonna be a little hard, but if it feels legitimately impossible, whether it's the map or the environment, then step back. And if it starts feeling impossible in every environment, then maybe you are just a sissy. But like, don't overwhelm yourself. You want to challenge yourself, don't overwhelm yourself. What is the best way to shake off rust? Like have a consistent warm-up schedule with like 15-20 minutes of FFA, and then like this is a red flag to me. I played 8 hours a day, saw no improvement. Well, you're not going to see any improvement. Like I'm telling you, if I took, like, let's say I didn't play basketball for a month and I came back and I played 10 hours in one day, I'd suck all day long, right? It would take me 2 or 3 days, and then I'd wake up the next day and all of a sudden I'm actually like I've got some of it back. So it's like it's just the way the mind works. Like you need to not overwhelm yourself in the first day back. Do your good warm up. Go play 2 or 3 hours. You know you're gonna suck. Don't worry about it. Do the same thing the next day, and then over the course of 2 or 3 days, you'll come back. But don't. This is too much. This is 8 hours in one day. Like unless that's what you normally do. But even then, you're not gonna get it the first day. It's gonna take a couple days. Sleep, reset your mind, go again. But have a consistent schedule, because what's I probably bet is like 8 hours. Oh, I suck. I'm not gonna play tomorrow. It's better to play a little bit every day than to overwhelm yourself, especially when you're coming back. My hero pool is right now very narrow. Flex out the DPS team, I just suck on any hero that isn't what I mean. I mean, okay, these are so many questions piled into one, but I'm gonna focus on your hero pool. If you feel like you need to flex, think about what is the hero good at. So like if I were to play Zenyatta or Ana, and I'm a Zenyatta on me, but I'm gonna flex to Brig really quick. Well, what is Brig good at? Well, I'm gonna pack my squishies and I'm gonna protect my backline, and that's all I focus on. I don't get into the nitty gritty of like, oh, I'm gonna push aggressively here, or I'm gonna do this here. I'm just gonna focus on the most important aspects. If you're trying to flex, I need to play Echo into this comp. What is Echo good at? Well, off angling and heavy spam damage. So I'm gonna focus on those two things. Make it really simple for yourself. Don't get in the nitty gritty. Don't worry about if you choke up on the little stuff. Just focus on the big, easy stuff. And don't let the other stuff slide. Your server's very dead. We're shooting never play 150 ping. 150 ping is a little rough, but it's not impossible. It's up to you. You'd have to try it and see, like, what's fun for you? What's fun? That's my question. Is this game dying? No. I mean, every game goes into like this game isn't in maintenance mode. No. But I mean, if you have to ask that question, maybe it's time to move on for you. Sounds like if you play the game because you want to play the game, man. Like, I get if you're having to make a professional career out of it, but I mean, no offense, if you're taking breaks from Overwatch and then coming back, like, unless you're like, I highly doubt that you're thinking about going pro. When self-VOD reviewing, should I use a scrim VOD or a comp VOD? I mean, it depends on you're trying to get better in scrims or you're trying to get better in comp. I mean, some of the stuff does carry over, but if you notice with my Aiden thing, I didn't talk very much about his micro, and it talked more about his communication than anything else. A little bit of micro, but definitely more communication. So if you're trying to get better in scrims, review scrim pod. If you're trying to get better in comp, review comp pod. It will carry over, but there's definitely some differentiation between the two. Doesn't matter what game. If you have a map that you want to work on, but it was a roll, doesn't matter. You can still look it over. If you've got, if you want to look at a close game that you lost, close game that you won, maybe a game that you played really well, these are all fine. Fairly good, close game, maybe a map that you're unfamiliar with, doesn't matter. Just don't pick stomps or when you got stomped, unless it's a map that you're really trying to study. How do you handle weightlifting or raw fitness with MMA training? Very cautiously, very cautiously. So I'm not an MMA expert at all, but like MMA, if you're not a fighter, is something that you should be treating like anything else. Be careful with it, protect yourself, be safe, don't overdo it, and tap fast. Tap, snap, or nap. You know what I'm saying? So always be the tap. No ego whatsoever. Because MMA, if you're sloppy with it or inconsistent, or you train too hard, too fast, you're going to injure yourself, and then you're not going to be able to weightlift, and you're not going to feel like it, and then you're going to burn yourself out, and then you're going to feel like crap when you're 55 years old. So be smart. Be really smart. And be careful. Don't overdo it. In terms of, I think that's what the question is. It's a question I don't quite understand. Excuse me. Is Genji still good? Genji's fine. Genji's, I haven't stress tested it a lot, but he's not bad. He's okay. He's not near as good as he used to be. If your streaming YouTube channel keep growing, and what you're doing it full time, yes, but I'm not sure. What is your opinion on Yodel's recent Zarya educational unranked GM? I do not know. I do not watch unranked GMs. They're a massive waste of time, in my opinion, because they're literally hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of really high ranked players just popping off in lower ranks, and that's not very educational to me. As much as they say it's educational, it's not that educational unless they're literally self-narrating 24/7. Which most aren't. That being said, I did watch Edel's guide to Zarya, and I thought it was very good. So I think the guide was good. Don't give a rip about the unranked GM. Now the Genji's nerf. What are the meta DPS? Again, don't know for sure. Definitely, you're going to continue to see some Ashe. You're going to see some Widow because Widow was scared of Genji. Widow's no longer scared of Genji as much, so Widow becomes a little bit more meta. You'll see some Tracer. You'll see some Echo, and as long as Dive becomes more prominent, you will see more Sombra. That's my initial guess. That's not a 100% sure thing, though. Are there any areas of Overwatch where you feel the educational content is lacking? I think Overwatch League level analysis is really, really bad. Like, if you think about it, who does Overwatch League level analysis? I've done some, but not a lot. I can't think of a single person that does Overwatch League analysis. Like, not a single person. I mean, not even talking about, like, I'm always on the lookout for smaller YouTube channels that do some Overwatch League level analysis. I don't even know of any of the smaller Overwatch League analysis folks that I used to go to do it right now. Nobody does Overwatch League analysis. VOD reviews, sure. Educational content, sure. Nobody does Overwatch League analysis. And at least nobody competent. Sideshow, don't give a rip what he has to say. I'm sure he's a great caster, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. It looks like we got a little bit of a VOD from Jake, so maybe Jake does some Overwatch League analysis, but nobody does Overwatch League level analysis. At least nobody good. There was a gold guy that does now analysis? You're right. So there's a serious gap with Overwatch League level analysis. Like Action Esports, but it's very vanilla, very generic. But yeah, nobody actually understands. Like you can see it, the casters have no idea why people are playing the comps, and it's a little frustrating. Decision making with the signing where they played Briggs in, Baps in, Brig Bap. Very low resource, good with Sigma Ball, good with Winston Zarya, good with Winston Sig. Anything where the tank line isn't going to demand a lot of healing. Baps in very spammy. Run it on maps where you're not going to get pressured by Tracer. Almost done, by the way. Brig Bap, any map where the Tracer is a threat and you want to play spam. Is it okay to use Bap regen burst right before engaging, or do you have to use? Yeah, don't use it right before engaging. It should be used reactively, never proactively. Can't think of a single circumstance where I'd proactively use regen burst before people took damage. It's such a short duration. Okay, good to know, Josh. I'm reading books about coaching. Have you ever come across teams whose perceptions of what they can do can't do to stop them from browsing that answer being easy, obvious? Not really. I think to some extent, part of Uprising's problems were because we were constantly changing rosters so much, we were kind of mediocre. And because we were mediocre for so long, the team kind of starts to believe that we're just always going to be mediocre, and that kind of psychology comes in. That's why I feel like with the current uprising situation, that they have a higher chance of being better than they were before. I don't know Lay Renegat or whatever he has as a coach. I don't know if he's good or bad, but I do know that like bringing in somebody new can sometimes kind of affect the team mentality because it's like, hey, it's different. Things are different. We're going to do differently. I know that definitely impacted us when we replaced Lethal and Eddie, who were, they were fine players, but a change kind of regenerated the team. Like just it's a psychological change. You saw it with Boston when they brought in Punk. Was Bruceson bad? No, Bruceson was fine. But when Punk came on, oh, now things are different, right? There's kind of that feeling. And so that kind of changes the perception of what we can and can't do, even if it doesn't actually change it all that much. I saw that firsthand, and I think that's important as a team. But obviously, that only lasts so long. If you are actually a bad team, or your teammate or your team or your management has a bad philosophy, then that's only going to be short term. It's not going to last forever. How true is the statement to you as a coach? I have to adapt to what players are now. Lampard at 23 was a man. Players now are brand their brats. It's false. I think men in general right now, like this is across not just men, but men and women right now, mature slower. I think that we're very much like younger kids are a lot more mature when it comes to sexuality, when it comes to verbiage and knowing a lot of like very mature in topics. Like I'm a Christian, so I have my own viewpoints in that, which but like even from like a very agnostic viewpoint, like children sexuality, like it's very, very, very. There's a level of like maturity and flippancy that a lot of very mature topics are dealt with. But ironically, children are also have never been more immature, like less able. Like how many teenagers do you know that can't hold a decent conversation or have never had a job, or how many 30-year-olds are living with their parents, and that's an economical problem as well, I'm sure. But I wouldn't say that they're brats. I just think that there's a level of immaturity that's just in today's society. Like back in the day, because it was you had to, people 15, 16 years old, they're basically men and women. They've been taking care of themselves, working hard, there's dedicating like all this kind of stuff. So like, they had to be mature. Nowadays we kind of live in a society where things aren't great, but like we have food, we're warm, we're cold. We don't have to be, we don't have to be 14 years old getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning working on the farm. So I wouldn't say they're brats, though. I think that's kind of a boomer tier take, to be honest. But yeah. What do you think of lamp usage? I already went over that. How should I take off angles of Sigma? Should I just aim to poke my hit scan most of the time? No, you should. You can, but it depends on the hit scan. And you should take off angles of Sigma as often as you can without your main tank just immediately dying. Which is why when you play a Reinhardt, you generally play a little bit less off angles because he needs you more. But if you're playing Orisa, she doesn't need you. If you're playing with the ball, she doesn't need you. Playing with the Winston, she doesn't need you. So you can off angle more. But you can also position her on your backline as well. How much should I play off tank? How much should I play main tank? I mean, unless you're playing, I mean, you should almost always like put it this way. Unless you're playing like Winston Ball or Winston Sigma or Ball Sigma, you should be almost always off tanking. Almost always. I'm gonna have to do the rest of this later. Is Genji still good? I think is meta now. I went over this already. I think Genji's fine. He's not great. I think Echo, Ashe, Tracer, Torbjorn, Widow are all fine. Widow looks to be more fine than she was before though. So keep an eye on Widow, Tracer. Those are the two heroes I'm really interested in seeing. Okay, I'm gonna skip these questions for right now. I'll go over this one. Is Torp Fire Arc do physical PO build? Yes, it's fine. Okay, we'll do this question later. I'm going to repost this one so I don't forget because I do want to look at this later at some point. And then I will see you guys